Realistically, yesterday, and it was, we played the song. I guess everybody kind of has to, but, realistically, the Green Day joke yesterday, that was played out like 10 years ago, right? Hey, somebody wake up Green Day, September ends, that joke, but we still do it. It's kind of like the Justin Timberlake, it's got to be May joke. But it wasn't about on October 1st, any sort of a September ends Green Day theme, whatever else. And it was more about, it was a day of retirements yesterday. Now, we're still here, so neither Eddie, much to the dismay of probably many of you, neither Eddie nor myself retired yesterday. But there were plenty, retirements aplenty. You had retirements in terms of somebody that you're like, wait, that hadn't happened yet? Then you had a retirement in the form of, that probably should have already happened, but I had tangible proof it hadn't. And then you had a retirement in the form of, the hell did I just watch? So we'll begin with the one that yesterday, and I realize it happened right before we came on the air, but I'll be honest, I didn't find it to be overly symbolic or symbolic, yes, but earth-shattering in the fact that yesterday the Colts announced that Shaq Leonard previously known as Darius Leonard, would retire as officially a Colt and do it this weekend and bang the anvil and go through the whole ceremony. Now, I didn't find that to be overly news or noteworthy, if I'm being honest, only because, I found that to be just symbolic more than anything else. Like, hey, he's officially retiring a Colt. Guys come back and do that, right? They sign a one-day contract 2 years after they played a final game. And you realize that it's just the symbolism of it. They want to make sure that it's officially on their roster chart or their resume that they retired a member of the organization where they feel like they really came into their own. So yesterday, that announcement for Shaq Leonard, who was a wonderful player, there's no doubt about it. But Shaq Leonard is a player that he had this, and I think at the time, you could probably go back and make the point, make the discussion, make the argument that in Shaq Leonard's case, there was a little bit of he benefited from a system that was designed to funnel things towards him. But at the same time, he was he had an incredible knack for making the big play and notably creating the big turnover when the Colts most needed it. No question about it. And he provided the fans here and the organization and the people of Indianapolis a huge amount of joy during the time in which he played and was an underdog story. And there was nothing about Shaq Leonard really as a player that you disliked. So he deserves the flowers that he's getting in terms of that ceremony and the symbolism of his retirement there. And so yesterday when I saw that headline, I just thought, okay, well, he is symbolically retiring. I just assumed that he had filed that paperwork a long time ago. Then once we were off the air, and that it always seems to happen that way, but a couple hours after we were done, the news that Xavien Howard now is done as an NFL player. And I hearken back to this. Eddie, you were where in 2016?
I would have been a junior in high school.
Okay. So at that time, 2016 was when the Colts were in a situation where they needed help at corner, and they went out and they got Antonio Cromartie. And Antonio Cromartie was a player that had been an All-Pro, was really probably, in terms of a defensive backfield, one of the best in the league, the best to do it in his prime. And the Colts were in need of defensive help. They were in need from a roster standpoint of, a last-minute addition at corner, and they go out and they sign Antonio Cromartie. And it's like, oh, wow, okay, let's go. Antonio Cromartie, former Jet, like, not necessarily Revis Island, but darn close, athletic, rangy, big guy. Let's go. And there were two things that came into play there which didn't necessarily totally repeat itself, but did to an extent. And that is when they brought in Cromartie, they then went and really the telltale, I think, was when they went to London to play Jacksonville. And supposedly he left and went to Paris, took the channel over to Paris to go shopping, and then came back. And he absolutely, I mean, I know that they love their tea in London, and I know they love their crumpets. I don't even know what crumpets are, but I hope they like their toast because Antonio Cromartie provided it. He got absolutely toasted. He got absolutely roasted. He was absolutely scorched earth. And immediately the Colts, after 4 games, went, yeah, okay, this just did not work out. We appreciate your time. This didn't work out. And so he was released. It feels like history kind of repeated itself to an extent. Xavien Howard, when the Colts got themselves in position this year where all of a sudden, and that came off the wrong way. I'm not going to say where they got themselves in position. There was nothing they could do about it. Injuries happen in the National Football League. And it's no different than your fantasy. Fantasy football is such a unique tool because it does two things. It allows you to have an interest in games in which you would otherwise have no interest. The Cardinals are playing the Patriots. Ugh. Except for you have Marvin Harrison Jr. on your fantasy team, so now you have a reason to watch that game. And the other thing that fantasy football does is it does allow you to understand the difficulty and the challenge when you have a position room, using an NFL term there, that is depleted of its players due to injury and attrition. Our fantasy league right now, which, again, I find very suspect that Nate from Chicago's Pizza is leading our league because it is basically the Chicago's Pizza Fantasy Football League. We had our draft at Chicago's Pizza, and Nate's now undefeated and leading the league. But our league, for example, you can only have so many wide receivers, and wide receiver is such an important position. And if you have a bye week or a couple of injuries, now all of a sudden you are frantically scouring the waiver wire in your fantasy league. I say this not because anybody cares about your fantasy team, but because it gives you relation to what the Colts, the situation that they're in. They found themselves in position where, due to attrition, due to injury, due to Jalen Jones going down, due to, other players that have been knocked out, they've had to go out and scour the waiver wires and get themselves a corner. And so they did so in Xavien Howard. And now, Eddie, we still don't know. Alec Pierce, for example, now other side of the ball, but Alec Pierce, we don't know. He went through practice yesterday, but that gives you an idea with the concussion protocol, the trickiness of what they're working with in terms of getting guys healthy and getting them back, correct?
He went through practice yesterday with the blue jersey, which is the contact jersey, Jake. So that's an encouraging sign. And it wasn't the red non-contact jersey, which would mean that he's further along in the protocol than we knew going into the week. So it does seem encouraging that Alec Pierce will be able to suit up on Sunday. Now we'll just have to be on the lookout, I think, on probably Saturday morning, early afternoon, for kind of like when Travarius Ward was in the concussion protocol, of them announcing like, hey, he's off the injury report. He has cleared the NFL's concussion protocol, and he'll be active and good to go Sunday.
And that's so with Ward, for example, when he goes down, then Kenny Moore goes down, and you already had the situation with Jones. So you're having to go out there, and that's how they end up with Xavien Howard. I get it. Right? And it's worth, you understand, but I think sometimes we get intrigued by, and the same thing happens with your fantasy team. I don't mean you, Eddie, but whoever's listening, you get what I'm talking about, where you have to scour that waiver wire, and you're like, oh, wow, DeAndre Hopkins is available. Well, yeah, I need a receiver. There you go. And what you forget is that Father Time is undefeated. And so, therefore, you go out and you get DeAndre Hopkins, and you're like, wait a minute, like they hardly throwing the ball. Well, there is that cliff that guys can go over. And in the case of Howard, I think that's what happened, basically. it was worth taking a shot. It was worth taking a look. What you find out is that especially like 30 is kind of the magic number. He's 31 years old. Guys, when they get to that age, just the burst and the speed, it simply is not there. And in the National Football League, the window is so finite in terms of the gap space. And let me explain what I mean by that and why yesterday we had the retirement of Xavien Howard, which I think actually the Colts did him a favor. But allow me to explain. I recall talking with one NFL scout, this was about 4 or 5 years ago, about quarterbacks coming out of college. And they were saying, the one thing that is the most difficult to judge with a quarterback coming out of college is if they are coming out of a big-time program. Trevor Lawrence at Clemson, Tua at Alabama. For that matter, you could make the argument, Bryce Young out of Alabama. Even Jalen Hurts, which, I realize he started at Alabama, but then at Oklahoma. When you look at those quarterbacks and you say, in college, man, they were unbelievable. The ball was everywhere it needed to be instantaneously. They've got laser focus at the quarterbacking spot. They can put the ball wherever it needs to go, etc. But the one thing that scouts keep in mind, and it makes it difficult to figure out, is those guys in college are throwing to NFL receivers that are literally 2 steps ahead of everybody, and the gap is huge. So they know when they're dropping back and they're getting ready to make a pass, their timing in college doesn't have to be as precise because the gap window is like a second and a half. They know that guy they're throwing to. That guy that they're throwing to, whether it be Justin Ross or Smith, Devontae Smith, whoever it might be, they know that those players are a step and a half ahead of the defender, and so therefore it's unimpeded. And then they get into the NFL and they realize, oh wow, the gap, the window. It's like Peyton Manning once said to Tom Moore, that guy wasn't open, and Tom Moore said he was NFL open. He wasn't Tennessee open. He was NFL open. And so the window is so short. The reason that is because defensive backs in the National Football League are able to keep up with receivers to an extent. Because you're moving backwards. It's a totally different skill set. And think about the difference. Jeff Ricker was just in here, made a great point. We're sitting here shooting the bull about it, and he says, think about the difference between a top-flight defensive back and an in-space Tyreek Hill. And then take that top-flight defensive back, even with that gap at his very best, and remove even a finite 10%. So in Xavien Howard, for example, if he loses that 10%, now all of a sudden that gap is even – now all of a sudden you're at college gap. You're back to college gap window instead of NFL window. And that's what the Colts realized was taking place. It was worth taking a flyer on him. He's a former guy that knows Lou Anarumo's system, that is familiar with it, that's been an all-pro. But thank you for your service. 4 games, we realized the gap is just too big. You've lost that 10%. And I think they did him a solid by saying, instead of us releasing you, would you like to announce your retirement? And he says, okay. And, I would imagine that that's probably it. Now, maybe some team gets totally desperate, takes one more flyer on it. He's 31 years old. But I think it's probably the Antonio Cromartie situation where it illuminated to everybody what the situation was. So, therefore, yesterday, for the Colts, you have that retirement. They did not go out and, again, hit that waiver wire. They instead elevated Trey Washington off of the practice squad in the defensive backfield, and then you hope that you get guys back and healthy. Jalen Jones eventually comes back, etc., and you take your chances with it. And they now are going up this – the other good news they have is they're going against an offense this weekend that while Geno Smith, I think, is a good player, he has had so far this year an inability to take care of the football, and he's a little bit – his interception numbers have peaked back up into Jets at Geno Smith Jets area, and maybe that – buys the Colts another week before they have to be completely locked in. Kyler Murray, he's still finding his way with his receivers as well. So for the next couple of weeks, they might be able to kind of get by with slowly reacclimating at the defensive backfield position. Then there was retirement number 3 that took place last night. It took place about, I've got to go back and think about it, I'm going to say 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock last night. And that retirement was, it in terms of the side and then the season, the Cincinnati Reds, who found themselves, and Eddie is still just staring at the floor. Eddie is despondent. Eddie is in a trance. Eddie is in a what did I just see mode.
Not at all.
Where the Reds get the bases loaded, a chance to get themselves back in the game. I mean, they obviously took the 2-0 lead, but
well, the spiral started, Jake, when they had the bases loaded and no outs. In the 3rd inning, they don't score. And next thing you know, it's hit, and they're down 4-0. They're down 4-2, 5-2, whatever it was.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. So they got out to the 2-0 lead, and then I thought I saw some statistic in terms of getting bases loaded with nobody out and not scoring a run, and the rarity of that in the postseason. I mean, it's historic stuff, right?
Well, at least it's not the Yankees, Jake, where they had the bases loaded and nobody out in the 9th inning and just needed 1 run to tie, and they don't score a run at all. At least it wasn't that.
Who did you say you're rooting for between the Yankees and Red Sox?
The Red Sox.
And for what reason?
I can't stand the Yankees.
But the Red Sox are kind of the Yankees light, aren't they?
I know.
It's at this point.
I am enjoying the painful nature of which Yankees fans are going through right now with Aaron Boone. They got an all-time great, and they can't win with him. Talking about Aaron Judge.
He is a great player. Well, why would you say they can't win with him?
Because they can't.
Okay, fair enough.
They haven't won a World Series with him.
Well, sure.
That's what I should say. They haven't won a World Series. They can win with him, obviously. They just can't win when it matters.
Right. Okay, fair. But the baseball playoffs, though, there is a magic. I'm sitting there watching the Reds, and I'm like, yeah, it's cool. It's the postseason. It's the Reds. But the Reds feel like they are still an organization, and I'm a Reds fan per se, kind of a transient bandwagon Reds fan, like when it's going well, admittedly. But that's who I root for in baseball. But nonetheless, when you're watching a postseason game, I mean, it is special, and you're like, man, it is just so cool, and it takes so long to get there, and I get it. I mean, you've heard my old man rant about breaking out the goggles and the champagne and whatever else.
Dodgers did it last night.
Mookie Betts, you heard Mookie Betts was asked about it.
Yeah.
And he sounded to me like me. He was kind of like, I guess we're going to do this, right? I mean, Scott Van Pelt asked him about it as soon as the game was over.
Yeah.
And he basically was saying, yeah, I mean, I guess we'll do that. But I think he was kind of in my camp of like, I don't know, we just did this, didn't we? But the Reds feel like, as an organization and as a fan base, the spraying of champagne for getting into the postseason, that is their culmination celebration, because they haven't won a postseason game now in 14 years? So there was an element of, it looked like a franchise, a team, an organization, a vibe that was happy to be there, right?
Yeah, pretty much. That's what it came down to, yeah.
But you got to, with anything, you got to want for more than that, right?
Changes need to be made, Jake, and I don't know if they'll make the changes, because the way the franchise has operated the last 5 to 10 years is that they've been fine with 500 play, and they'll try to sell their fans like, hey, we made the playoffs this year. We can build on this.
They kind of backed into it, right?
Yeah, we had a lot of down years. Like Matt McClain had a down year. Spencer Steer had a down year. Well, maybe they're just not good.
Okay, now, you said changes need to be made. I think Miles Turner realized that he needed to change his tune a little bit. Now, Xavien Howard, what we saw yesterday for the Colts was a player that was retired because he just doesn't have the same step, and when you are a defensive back, that step has to be walking it backwards, right? Miles Turner put himself in position, and I like Miles Turner. Open disclaimer, I like Miles Turner. I think everybody knows that. I like him as a player, and I like him as a guy. I really like him. And I get it. I get the frustration within the franchise itself because of the different situations he was put in terms of, the DeAndre Ayton sheet. I mean, we've gone over all that. But he's walking it back now, what it was that he said yesterday, right? Or said a couple of days ago. Then yesterday he tries to clarify it. When he comes out and says for media day for the Milwaukee Bucks, look, it's great to be somewhere where I'm celebrated. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. Then he comes out on social media and says, whoa. I was talking about the free agency process. I was not talking about the fans themselves. And I get it because I think he realized, well, wait a minute. And I understand this as well, although you would think in 2025 everyone would know this instantly. But I do somewhat understand where when he was talking to the Milwaukee media, when he's talking to media day, thinking that he's speaking just to the Bucks, that he almost was naive or not thinking about, naive is probably the wrong word, but just in the moment wasn't thinking about, wait a minute, what I'm about to say is going to be heard beyond just the Buck Nation, okay? And so he makes those comments, and then he has to go back and walk it back a little bit. And at this point, and I agree with what JMV said on social media, it's too late. It's out there. It's too late. You can't clarify it now. You can't go back now. You can't walk it back. You're Xavien Howard. You're trying to move backwards and backpedal and clean it up. It's too late. The words are out there. He was a great member of this community. He was a great member of the Pacers organization. And when he says, listen, I want to clarify, I was talking about the process. I was talking about and basically what he was implying was, Pacer fans, I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to the organization. But the problem with that is the fact that during the process, in his negotiation with the organization, Miles Turner really didn't open it up for counterpoint. Because, and I think what happened was this. I think the Pacers, I'm not going to say they lowballed him, but I understand it. When you are the Indiana Pacers and you're looking at other players on your roster that you've got to get figured out, and you know that you're going to have to eventually re-sign Nembhard Nembhard's on a pretty good deal right now, and a lengthy deal, but Nembhard, Nesmith, Walker, Matherin, Shepard, you have all these players. You've got to figure out your cap moving forward in the next, say, 4-year window. So Miles Turner, you assume that Miles Turner is going to want to stay here. You assume that he doesn't have an offer sheet from somebody already or have something out there. And so you kind of lowball him in your first offer, fully expecting that that's not anywhere near the number you're going to end up paying him. But you do it for the sake of doing it, right? It's no different than when you go in to buy a car. You know when you go in to buy a car, there is no way this guy's going to take $30,000 for this car. But I'm going to offer 30, knowing that it's probably going to cost me 38. But I'm going to start at 30 because if he takes it, whew, what a deal. And the Pacers, I think, did that. And so, yes, I understand where Miles Turner would be offended by that or upset by that, but he didn't give them a chance, by all account, to counter it because I think Milwaukee said, here is an offer that we're going to give to you, and you cannot use this, though, as negotiating ploy. This is your offer. You hear what Indiana has to say. We need an answer by end of same business day. And so there's a little bit of truth in both sides here. In Turner's case, I understand why he's upset, but at the same time, he didn't. In the Pacers' case, I understand why they were blindsided because he didn't give them a chance to counter. The thing, Eddie, in all of this that seems odd is when it happened, the word was that Miles Turner hadn't talked to anybody. Then we had Aaron Nesmith on, and what did Aaron Nesmith say? That Miles Turner told all the players in his group chat that this is what was going to happen.
Yeah,
allegedly. Wait a minute.
Allegedly, Jake. Allegedly.
I think he probably did, right? Why would Nesmith, though, say, no, I mean, Turner sent us a text to all of us, and we understood what's best for his family.
I guess he could have sent a text, but the timing of the text, was it
before or after? Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. I sent you a text, Jake. I didn't tell you when I sent the text.
Fair. But But there would be reason for, at that time with that report coming out, like there's no reason for Aaron Nesmith to basically, say that. And I'm not saying Aaron Nesmith's a liar by any stretch. I mean, that's not what I'm saying. I think he's being truthful because why would he throw that nugget out there if it wasn't true? But I just think Miles Turner, this is a situation, and at times when he was a player here, with all players, it comes into play. I just don't think he totally thought through what it was he was saying in the moment. And I think he thought, like, I'm really going to draw a line in the sand here, and I'm going to get it out there as to how I feel about Indiana and that process. And it's all of these insecurities, all of these frustrations, all of these things boiled over once finally the power was put in his hands through that negotiating process. And I think all the things that he had previously just stored away and locked away in the back of his mind and played through all came out in one fell swoop, and the frustration and the insecurity and the anger, all of it came out. And then he realizes, oh gosh, like I think fans think I mean them there. That's not what I'm talking about at all. And I don't think the Pacers were wrong per se. I don't think Miles Turner's wrong per se. But he is trying to walk it back a little bit, and we saw it yesterday. But in terms of negotiations, in terms of lines in the sand, I think a little bit of that is taking place, and in particular with one player here in Central Indiana on a national and global standpoint. In terms of power of positioning and the attempt at leverage in business. And there's one player here in Central Indiana that has kind of found themselves right in the middle of all of it. And it may get even murkier and uglier. And I'll explain what I'm talking about. Big show lined up for you today. When we come back, I will do that. Matt Verderame going to join us 1 o'clock today. JT the Brick, who does Raiders radio and is out in Las Vegas, the national radio host, going to join us at 2 o'clock today. Matt Taylor, voice of the Colts, at 2:30. So a big show lined up for you on this Thursday, a glorious-looking Thursday. But unlike those things we're talking about, we're not backpedaling. We're looking forward. And I'm going to prognosticate with one player in this town that might find themselves in the middle of a big brouhaha. I'll tell you about it next. So you just heard JMV talking about this. And this is something that initially, your ears perked up. And as we've gone along here, it's become a bigger and bigger story. And I think it's about to become a massive, not that it's not already, massive story. And let me explain what I'm talking about. The big headlines came out. And I can't recall, my days all run together, but was it Monday or Tuesday when Nafisa Collier basically called a press conference to express her concerns about the leadership of the WNBA?
It was, I think it was Monday.
Monday sounds right,
right?
It
was at her exit interview. That's how she started her exit interview.
And so she voiced her concerns about leadership with the WNBA, and in doing so, roped in the biggest star in the WNBA. This is Nafisa Collier talking about her concerns with Kathy Engelbert, who is the commissioner of the WNBA, and the leadership of the league itself.
At Unrivaled this past February, I sat across from Kathy and asked how she planned to address the officiating issues in our league. Her response was, well, only the losers complain about the refs. I also asked how she planned to fix the fact that players like Caitlin, Angel, and Paige, who are clearly driving massive revenue for the league, are making so little for their first 4 years. Her response was, Caitlin should be grateful she makes $16 million off the court, because without the platform that the WNBA gives her, she wouldn't make anything. And in that same conversation, she told me players should be on their knees thanking their lucky stars for the media rights deal that I got them.
Now, Caitlin Clark has addressed this today. Okay? And Caitlin Clark is one that, for the most part, I think kind of stays out of things, if you will, right? And just you don't hear a lot. We don't hear a lot from her in general, but she's been hurt. So, I mean, I get that aspect of it, okay? But Caitlin Clark said the following, quote, "First of all, I have great respect for Fee." That would be Collier, obviously. Back to the quote. "And I think she might have made a lot of very valid points. More people need to understand we need great leadership in this time across all levels. This is straight up the most important moment in this league's history. This league's been around for 25 plus years, and this is a moment we have to capitalize on. So that's honestly what I would say. Fee said it all with what she said, and the points she made were very valid." End quote from Caitlin Clark. What they're referring to is this, and what I think we're seeing and hearing is the following. The WNBA, which, as Caitlin Clark just mentioned there, began 25 years ago. And the WNBA right now is at its peak popularity, and for that reason, the collective bargaining agreement that was agreed upon in terms of all of the things that a player for the WNBA gets in terms of revenue share and, salaries, improved benefits, childcare, maternity leave, all of those things, travel standards, all of those things that were agreed upon were set to expire at the end of 2027. But there was a clause within that collective bargaining agreement that the players could opt out of it and renegotiate it by the deadline of October 31st of this year. What you are seeing is a power play between the commissioner of the WNBA and the players themselves. And while it is easy to sit back, and especially in a league in where we, as a general rule, are not, there's really only one league, maybe two, where we do like daily play-by-play analysis of collective bargaining negotiations, and that's the NFL and the NBA. Those are the two, because of the television dollars that pour into that and the way that it's divvied up and the way it impacts salaries and salary cap windows. I mean, you look at, for example, Lance Stevenson. When Lance Stevenson was leaving Indiana after his rookie deal, and everybody thought he was a moron for going to Charlotte and taking a contract that paid him less than what he was being offered in Indiana. But what everybody was saying or overlooking was he opted for a 4-year contract instead of a 5-year contract. Even though the average annual salary was less, he wanted the 4 years because his agent was able to look at it and say, the new collective bargaining agreement is going to take place in that year of free agency. And when that happens, that's the year when everybody just goes out and starts spending money galore because the salary cap raises so much. You want to be in that window and take advantage in that particular year. Now, Stevenson gambled on himself and lost because he didn't play as well. But that's why he was going with that shorter contract, because he wanted to cash in that year when the TV money kicked in. And the WNBA right now is going through that exact thing where the players are saying, look, we need better than this because we are the ones that have raised the standard here. And I understand, I'm not saying I agree with, I understand where the commissioner is coming from, because it is her job as the commissioner to speak essentially as the representative, as the bad guy, as the bad deliverer and message stater for the owners of the league itself. And so therefore they are saying, look, if these players are wanting higher salary, if these players are wanting a bigger slice of the pie, like, we've got to start making it clear now where we stand in this new negotiation that we're about to go through. And both sides are giving their firm line. Nope, I'm going to sell this car. I can't budge over $38,000 I need for this car. No, I'm not going to pay over 30. Okay, let's meet somewhere in the middle. Where in the beginning it gets real nasty, and it may still. And in terms of the standpoint of Caitlin Clark, and she better be happy she's making $60 million off the court, and she wouldn't make that if it weren't for the WNBA. Exactly. I mean, that is the most laughable thing ever.
That is so ignorant. Caitlin
Clark. Well, here's the thing, Eddie. It's not ignorant, because what it is it's negotiation. I don't think she believes that. I don't think Kathy Engelbert believes that in one way, shape, or form. But as the commissioner of the WNBA, and I want to be very clear here. I'm not saying I agree with her. I'm saying her job is to present the hardline stance from the owners and the league standpoint of making sure that they don't all of a sudden completely give in to every player demand throughout this negotiation. That's her job. The job of the players then, of course, is to say, no, we want this because this is what we're bringing you. Yes, it was an ignorant thing to take it. I don't think she believes it is what I'm getting at. But she's throwing that out there because she's trying to draw that line in the sand of this collective bargaining agreement that is about to be retooled with a Halloween deadline. And so you play hardball to begin with. And look, Nafisa Collier was whether it was her own initiation, whether the other players went to her and said, can you be the one to speak up for us, whatever it may be, she's the one drawing that line in the sand on the other side of things. And Caitlin Clark is, because she is the straw that mixes the drink of the WNBA in every aspect. You know, there are great players in the WNBA, but Caitlin Clark is the most transcendent. Caitlin Clark is the name that if you are somebody living in Cheyenne, Wyoming, or Jacksonville, Florida, or, Augusta, Maine, she's the player in the Hey, are you familiar with the WNBA? Yeah, I think that's the women's league, right? Does Caitlin Clark play in that? She's the transcendent one, so her name is automatically going to get attached into it, because what comes with the benefit of being all of that money that you're talking about, Engelbert is correct in that regard, in the fact that when it comes to the WNBA, she is synonymous with that platform. But Caitlin Clark would be synonymous with whatever league she's playing in right now, because of the fact that that began at Iowa. Mm-hmm. I know this because I sat during an IndyCar weekend, I sat one time in my hotel room and for 2.5 hours to watch nothing but the women's Final Four, because I'm like, I can't believe what this girl at Iowa's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's going behind her back, pulling up Steph Curry threes, and my dad's texting my sister on a group family text about it, and my dad's, all about Caitlin Clark, and people are all about Caitlin Clark. I mean, and you remember, Eddie, when Caitlin Clark, when it was finally determined that she was going to forego her eligibility and go into the WNBA draft, and the Fever had the number 1 pick, we were at the Combine. I think Matt Verderame is going to join us here in about 15 minutes, was with us that day, and our lead conversation the whole time was the fact that Caitlin Clark was coming to Indiana, and this was during the NFL Draft Combine.
Mm-hmm.
because she was that big a transcendent star in college. So that money was going to follow her wherever she was going to go. She could be playing right now professional basketball in Australia, and there would be TV contracts here for people to see it because she's that transcendent a star. But what you're seeing here is that transcendence attaches her to an argument from both sides. And she's kind of caught in the middle of it and now comes out and says, hey, I'm glad that Collier said what I would have said. And she's probably grateful that there is a player keeping that platform. But what you are seeing here is the beginning of what is going to be a month-long power play in a collective bargaining agreement. And the key word of that is agreement. And that's what's going to be probably continuing to be a back and forth here over the next couple of weeks. And then eventually they will have a new agreement. There will be some sort of, an improvement, whether it be hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know about that, but there's going to be an improvement in the situation the players are looking for. There will be something that appeases what the owners are looking for. And then everybody will do essentially a Miles Turner on this walk back Thursday and say, you know what, actually, let's clarify what we meant. And boom, you come to a retirement of that particular story. Matt Verderam joins us in 15. By the way, Eddie, do you happen to have the breaking news sounder? It will be on Monday when we tell you exactly who, because we are still waiting the ink to dry, if you will. We're dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
Okay. We're on our P's and Q's. Is that what we're doing?
Do you know what that stands for, by the way?
I don't. I was just referring to Anthony Richardson needing to be on his P's and Q's.
Do you know what that comes from? I believe this is my favorite fun fact.
Okay. Mind
your P's and Q's. Do you know the origin of that phrase?
No.
I believe I've mentioned it on the air before, but you probably were. You've got on the iced tea or the Mr. T starter kit today, by the way.
I do.
Mm-hmm. You got a couple of big necklaces hanging down.
Oh, thanks.
But you probably pity the fool when I was talking about my P's and Q's and my favorite fun fact. So I'll get to that in a second in terms of the origin of it, because it is a fun thing. But we'll probably officially be able to announce this on Monday. But I am thrilled about this. Thrilled.
Soon-to-be sponsored. Is it the soon-to-be sponsored guest line? Or?
The guest line, in fact. The guest line, in fact, is going to again be sponsored. And
LFG.
This is why I'm thrilled about it.
LFG, Jake. I hope you know what those stand for.
I do. I indeed do, right? That means this is legitimately freaking good, right?
Yeah.
I am thrilled about I'm thrilled anytime that we have companies that are willing to partner with this show. And, Chicago's Pizza. I love the folks at Chicago's Pizza. They're great, right? Surfside,
absolutely
great folks. Surfside, right?
Yep.
Premier Weight Loss.
How did Surfside last night?
Franciscan has, they're wonderful. I mean, the fact Franciscan and Premier Weight Loss both, trusting me to get the word out about good health for people. I mean, I'm happy about all of it, right? Indiana Donor Network, we've done a lot with. So anytime, and the people that have been kind enough to get on board with us in the past.
Love Heating and Air.
Love Heating and Air is another one, right? Ryan Geis, was great to us during the course of the time that we were on.
Greenfield Signs?
Greenfield Signs. So we've had plenty who, and I'm appreciative and thankful for all of it. This one I'm particularly excited about because of two things. Number one, it's a product I love. It is a product that I love, and
we love,
and Eddie does as well. And number two, it combines really two of my passions. One of my passions is, just being able and being fortunate enough to talk to people and interact with people and engage with people on this radio show each day. And, look, at times, do I ruffle? I don't try to do this. I'm saying I'm understanding of the fact that not every opinion I have, everyone's going to agree with. I understand the fact that there are probably a lot of people that don't, at times, get tired of me or don't like me. I get it, right? But at its core, I do appreciate and love being able to interact with people and share experiences of the things that we do on the radio show, off the radio show. The other of my passions is, of course, the fact that I travel around with IndyCar. And I love, love, love the Indianapolis 500 and IndyCar racing in general. But the 500 and the Speedway, I think everybody knows, mean everything to me. So to be able to combine, really, those two passions, being able to speak with and interview people on the guest line and being able to do so with a company that also understands and is equally involved in my passion for racing, I love it. And that's why I am totally stoked and cannot wait for when we officially announce, I believe on Monday, who the guest line sponsor is. But it's a product and a company that I love the people, I love the product, I'm thrilled about it. And that's been true of everything we've done, but this one, I'm very excited.
Now, Jake, what is your passion and your overall enjoyment and love with working for me rank? Or with me, not for me.
Like I said, I'm happy that the other two things we're able to have, right? In terms
so
of my
you're not
passions.
happy to be able to have me as your producer every day?
No,
and as your president of your company?
Listen, I am thrilled that you're the president of the company, and I'm particularly thrilled about it because you do all of the legwork and the behind-the-scenes stuff, which means I don't have to do much. So in that regard, I hope the bosses didn't hear that. I do appreciate that. By the way, minding your P's and Q's. I've mentioned this before. You know what that comes down to? That comes down to the olden days in
Is it like Mind Your Manners or whatever?
very similar. In the old days in England, I believe it's England. It might be either
You
Ireland
should have
or
to
Scotland.
explain this in your English accent.
With old man English accent or just regular British accent?
Whatever you're feeling, Jake.
So in the old days, when you'd go into a pub, I don't know if it was Ireland, Scotland, or England. I think England. You would order, I'll take a pint, please. Or, yes, actually, there's a couple of, I'll take a quart. And so they would they would have like a chalkboard, and they'd put Eddie. And they would mark down whether you had a pint or a quart. And then if you had too many of them, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, over there, you let's go outside and fight. And all of a sudden you're starting fights and starting trouble, they would come to you and say, listen, we told you already, you've been having a little bit too much of the grog, and as a result, you're going to have to mind, we're looking at it right here, mind your P's and Q's. You're drinking too many of them. And so minding your P's and Q's was simply a reminder that make sure that you don't get overserved and cause trouble, so mind how many pints and quarts you've had. How about them apples? Matt Verderam, by the way, drinks his P's and Q's at Club Applebee's and the Taco Bell Cantina. Joins us next. I just actually got a text from somebody trying to guess the sponsor of the guest line. It's a pretty good guess. Pretty solid guess. They said you should do a contest. And I thought, you know what? That it actually would be kind of cool to do a contest where the winner of the contest, but then again, I don't know, it would have to tie in with the sponsor of the guest line. And I thought, you know what? We'll just build up the suspense and leave it at that, because then it becomes very convoluted. But it was a solid guess on who the guest line will be. The guest line is where we anticipate talking with Matt Verderam coming up just a couple of minutes. Yesterday, actually, I did some radio in Lost Wages, better known as Las Vegas, with JT the Brick, who, of course, a national radio host, and he is based out of Las Vegas. He is the Eddie Garrison of the Fever to the Raiders. In other words, he does like pre- and post-game stuff for the Raiders broadcasts, does a lot with Pete Carroll. I think he hosts the Pete Carroll show as well. And one of the things in talking to him, and he's going to join us in about an hour as JT the Brick, we'll go over the Raiders stuff. And one of the things we're going to talk about is just the fact that I'm going to say, I shouldn't say uncharacteristically, but maybe reverting back to old ways. And maybe part of it, and this is what I'll ask JT the Brick, maybe part of it is they are schematically doing things the wrong way, drawing things up for him. But the Raiders now, Geno Smith is starting to turn the ball over a little bit.
Two things. Yes, number one, he's second in the league in interceptions, and Matt Verderam had an emergency, and he cannot join us today.
Certainly hope everything's all right for Matt. Now, I thought about this in that discussion with JT yesterday. The Raiders and the interceptions from Geno Smith, combined with the fact that I saw a lot of discussion about, for example, the Ravens. And the Ravens offensively, we know, have a lot of weapons, and I think the world of Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry could be 53 years old, and I would be convinced that he could still go out and run. I'm sure people felt the same way about Jim Brown. The old joke, and it's now been used about, every single player, but the initial player that this was attributed to was the late, great Jim Brown, allegedly, when he was being interviewed when he was 45 years old or whatever, and somebody said, how many yards can you run for today? And he said, I could probably average 4 yards a carry. And they're like, really? Like, you think so? The league, has changed that much or whatever? And he said, well, keep in mind I'm 45. Meaning like, no, we don't mean like what you would do today as a 45-year-old guy. I do believe Derrick Henry, I'm just convinced of it. He's like ageless, right? But the Ravens with Derrick Henry, and even with his yards per carry average, I saw an entire discussion about the limited number of times that Derrick Henry carries the ball on first and second down. And they are essentially reserving him as a third down back. And why are they doing that? Because the Ravens offense, it is not as efficient on first and second down. And why would you not go earlier with what works for you? Now, you could make the argument or the discussion that the reason Derrick Henry's average is what it is because he's not being, in other words, well, they're not very efficient on first and second down, and yet Derrick Henry is averaging blank yards per carry. Well,
that is like the nerdiest thing I've ever heard you say, Jake.
No, this is what I'm saying. I think when you crunch those numbers and look at it, then you can figure out, okay, perhaps that's because the Ravens are throwing the ball so often on first and second down. Because the point is this: when he does carry the ball on first and second down, they're like sixth in the league on efficiency on those plays. And like, so why wouldn't they do it more? Well, because the more you do it, the more that number gets shrunk. In other words, first off, people are going to start loading the box if you do that a lot, right? Mm-hmm. As it is right now, they're dropping back because they know. And so when he does sparingly carry on first and second down, it's like, wow, why don't they do this more? Well, because once you start doing it more, then defenses start to counter for it. And to use my phrase, water finds its level, right?
Equilibrium, I think, is that
yeah. So,
proper scientific terminology.
So it can be convoluted. But if you decipher those aspects of the Ravens, or you look at Geno Smith and turning the ball over for the Raiders, the thing that essentially, as I was thinking about and analyzing all this, is the thing that the Colts have done really well to this point is Shane Steichen, and I don't know whether it's Shane Steichen doing this for Daniel Jones or whether it's Daniel Jones's skill set allows it for Shane Steichen. But the Colts are calling games and running an offense that caters towards what they do best. And the Colts, in doing that, are able, and I know that he had the 2 picks on Sunday. And we're going to see whether or not that's the anomaly or whether they're starting to trend that way, and the first couple of weeks were the anomaly when the Colts were so offensively efficient. But it feels to me like what we are seeing is an offense that is being designed, spelled out, and this would certainly, you would assume, be true of every team in the league. But it's being designed and spelled out and written out and game planned to suit the strength of its quarterback and stay away from its weakness as an offense. And you could say to yourself, well, Jake, every team does that. But if you are the Bills, if you are the Chiefs, if you are the Bengals when Joe Burrow's healthy, I don't know that you are as technical in your offensive playbook calling because you feel like you have quarterbacks with no governor on them. You can just let it go. And whatever play you call, you got a chance the play's going to work. Whether you want Josh Allen to air it out, whether you want Josh Allen to do a quarterback draw, whether you want Patrick Mahomes to find guys in space or go through all his reads or then, whatever it might be, whether you want Joe Burrow just that precision with all the weapons he's got, those guys you can call about anything. But are the Colts now offensively benefiting from the fact that they have a quarterback and Shane Steichen selected the quarterback that does have a governor limiter on it, and that forces them to be more selective and more analytical in the plays that they're calling and thus more efficient? And they have the Colts as an offense have multiple weapons, probably underrated weapons. I think offensively they are better than they're given credit. And it all starts, truthfully, with Tyler Warren. A year ago, 2 years ago, and you've heard me say this a lot, I realize, but their bailout play, their safety net play was either find Michael Pittman for 10 yards over the middle because he's a big target and he's reliable and he's durable, plays with a hurt back. I mean, there's a lot of dog in Michael Pittman. That was one, and the other was Josh Downs. Like, okay, Josh Downs is just floating around somewhere, like drop it off to him. Those were kind of their 2 bailout plays. Now they have the bailout play is right there. And Tyler Warren, is not bailout. I mean, they're designing things to him. But when all hell breaks loose, that's a guy that you can get to as your bailout player. But there are more players now. They just have more weapons. Part of that, too, is they are utilizing Jonathan Taylor in different ways. They're actually getting him the ball out of the backfield through the air more than they used to. They have Pittman in the areas where he's at his best. They have Downs, who at times they get involved. A.D. Mitchell, we've gone over that, but he is somebody that they've incorporated. Ashton Doolin, when he's on the field, they've incorporated. And Alec Pierce they're using in different ways. Now, how much of that, again, is because this is the strength to Daniel Jones, and how much of that is because we have to be selective in the way that we spell this out? But it all starts with Tyler Warren. and the fact that defenses have to be aware of where he is at all times, and that allows you to get into different areas more easily and more efficiently. And Eddie, I've talked, like, let's look at the Pacers, okay?
Okay.
If you look at the Pacers offense, when it's a different offense when Tyrese Halliburton is healthy versus, say, when Andrew Nembhard's running the point. Would you agree?
Agreed, yes.
Now, when Halliburton is healthy, that offense is go down, fast pace, score quickly, get an open three, or then kick back, and when Miles Turner was out there, get it to the top on the three, whatever, and then they run that kind of weave rotation where, you know, whether it be Nesmith or Nembhard or even Toppin, you know, they all can hit from the outside, or you go down to Siakam on the block, right? And so you are constantly working to get the ball where it needs to go. But when Halliburton's on the floor, you're basically Josh Allen. You're basically Mahomes. You're like, we can play at pace, we can go, and if we need to slow it down into a half-court set, that's fine, but we have flexibility. And when this year, for example, and I know Aaron Nesmith said they're still going to try to play at pace, but Rick Carlisle has essentially said or insinuated that they are going to go into more half-court sets with more regularity than what we were accustomed to a year ago, and that's an offense with Daniel Jones. You have to be more intentional in what you're doing. Now, my question for you, Eddie, is when you look at the lack of turnovers and the offensive efficiency that we saw out of Indianapolis in the first 3 games, is that because, oh, wow, Daniel Jones is this super smart, efficient quarterback? Or is that because Shane Steichen was saying, I'm picking this guy because he allows me to be more intentional and conservative in the way I'm calling plays, so I am calling them more strictly to suit his strengths and stay away and mask his weakness?
I think it's a little bit of both, because the one thing that we always talked about as a weakness for Daniel Jones going into the start of the season was he just doesn't push the ball deep, and he's been doing that. That's why the offense has been so efficient, is all the defenses have been playing him as trying to take away what's underneath. And
which, again, that goes back to Warren a lot, right?
Yeah.
Because you got to keep an eye on him.
And so, like, that's why you see a deep shots to Alec Pierce. That's why you've seen a deep shot to Michael Pittman Jr. That's why you've seen a mixed deep shot in there for Tyler Warren. And how teams respond now, they have to honor it. And it's going to open up things underneath for Josh Downs, Tyler Warren, Jonathan Taylor, who's been a big part of the passing game this year, and it'll help him in the run game as well. So I think it's all encompassing a part of Shane Steichen doing what works for Daniel Jones, while also putting the playmakers around Daniel Jones in the position to succeed as well.
So let me throw you this kind of weird theory, okay? And tell me if it makes sense, which is a dangerous thing when I'm about to say something, right? I realize, like,
sometimes, yeah.
You know, there are rabbit holes with my brain. I get that.
No, they're not rabbit holes. They're craters.
Thank you. Is it possible that the reason Shane Steichen opted for Daniel Jones, and I know that he says it's organizational, and he keeps going back to Shane Steichen keeps going back to with any player that he's talking about, he keeps going back to the narrative of, you know, hey, it's about what takes place in the building. It's about what takes place in the film room. You know, he said it at the receiver position this week about A.D. Mitchell. And yesterday somebody got on me. They're like, why are we bringing up the A.D. Mitchell story again? I'm like, we're bringing it up again because it's topical again, because the head coach has now admitted to or tipped his hand to the fact that this guy may be losing reps because of what happened in Los Angeles. And he kept going back to the part about organizationally, professionally approach all of those things. But is it possible that Shane Steichen selected Daniel Jones in the quarterback competition over Anthony Richardson, not necessarily and entirely because of all of those things, but rather because he, meaning Shane Steichen, knows that Anthony Richardson would tempt him too much.
What do you mean?
Anthony Richardson's strength as a quarterback is the long ball and the athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
Shane Steichen's strength as a coach is awakening things in a quarterback and being unpredictable in terms of offensive play calling. But is it possible that Shane Steichen looked at Anthony Richardson and knew, and I mean this in a strong suit about Shane Steichen, not as an indictment on him, but did Shane Steichen as a coach look at it and say, I have to trust my own instinct, and when it comes to Anthony Richardson, I don't. And when I have him on the field, I become too tempted and I fall too much in love with the exceptions and the excitement as opposed to the norm of what is efficient. And if I have Anthony Richardson as my quarterback, I'm going to be too tantalized by the 63-yard pass play or the quarterback draw, and that's not the efficiency by which I want to run my offense. And now that I have Tyler Warren, and now that I have a healthy Michael Pittman, and now that I have Jonathan Taylor that I'm going to work with in pass plays out of the backfield, I need things to be more simplified. And if I have Anthony Richardson on the field, I'm going to complicate them because I myself as a play caller am going to be tantalized by the potential of the big play and not keeping myself limited to what is efficient and more simplistic. And as long as I have Daniel Jones as my quarterback, I know my own limitation, and thus I'm going to call a smarter game.
Probably, and he keeps going back to, the operation of seeing everything. And like, how much did the failed blitz pickup impact it? Like, did
huge.
It just?
It's got to be huge, Eddie.
It just felt like that even before that, Jake, that the thought was that Daniel Jones was going to be the starter, and Anthony Richardson had to prove that he was, ready to be the starting quarterback again.
I saw it the other way around, though, in all honesty, and I know that clearly now I was wrong. But I really did think, and I think most people did, that when they signed Daniel Jones, that it was still, and I remember saying this, I said it repeatedly on this show. I said, if Daniel Jones is the starter week one, it's not going to be because he won the job. It's going to be because Anthony Richardson didn't. Because I felt like their default all along was going to be the guy that they selected where they did, and that they were still trying to tap into that youth of Anthony Richardson. But I really do think that that Shane Steichen, the more he saw Daniel Jones didn't do anything to blow anybody away in the preseason.
Exactly. He didn't do anything to blow anyone away, but he didn't do anything to blow it away.
Correct. That's correct. To blow it up, right?
Yeah.
And I just think the more he saw it, the more Shane Steichen thought to himself, you know what? Slow and steady wins the race. To use a really bad analogy.
Do I need to have the sounder ready?
Yeah, I'll let you. Once I say the analogy, if it's a really bad one, Eddie, I will let you use the fish vacuum cleaner bad analogy sounder, okay? But when I was a kid, back in my day, but years ago in the Indianapolis 500-mile race, Buick was an engine manufacturer that was entered in the race predominantly in the late 80s. And Buick was unbelievably fast. The Buick engine had this horsepower that was unbelievable. And Jim Crawford ran a Buick, and Roberto Guerrero set a pole record in the Buick. And the Buick, you knew the Buick engine was flat out fast. But it never lasted 500 miles until Al Unser Sr. did it once, the anomaly, in 1992. He went all 500 miles in the race in his Buick engine. But the reason that initially teams bought into the Buick, because they're like, the straight line speed of this thing is unbelievable. And its ability to pass is unbelievable. But as time went on, they realized, but it's less reliable than an Ilmore engine or one of the others that we can have to put inside of our car because in order to win the race, you've got to finish the race and you got to be there, and you can't have mistakes that happen like an engine going out, an engine failure, or something that leads to a long pit stop over the course of time, because while it might be sexier and it might be faster and it might jump out at you in terms of the speed chart over the course of 500 miles, you've got to be able to go with what is more efficient and reliable. And so, therefore, nobody won the race in the Buick because people got away from it because they realized that it never lasted the entire totality of the way. And it seems to me like perhaps Shane Steichen realized that Anthony Richardson was the Buick engine. Faster, stronger, pops out at you for sure, all the intangibles on paper. But when it comes down to it over the course and the totality of a four-quarter game, little things pop up that either lead to a bad pit stop or completely self-inflicted, can't last all 500 miles, and you're having to go to a backup engine anyway. And Daniel Jones, I think Daniel Jones is you didn't play the bad news or the bad analogy sounder. Does that mean you actually thought it was decent?
It was okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think Daniel Jones is a great story. Nothing against Anthony Richardson at all, but when I go to Colts games, and I'll do it on Sunday when I go to the game, one of the things I look for is what jerseys people are wearing when they walk in the stadium. And you can tell there are certain franchises, as we've talked about, that you're like, man, that franchise is in a world of hurt because everybody walking into that stadium is wearing a jersey of a guy that played 15 years ago. And when I walk into Colts games now, I'll probably see some Shaq Leonard jerseys on Sunday, fitting because he's going to have his retirement ceremony. But I'll probably see some Marvin Harrison jerseys and Reggie Wayne jerseys and Lord knows, a ton of Peyton Manning jerseys and Dallas Clark jerseys and Gary Brackett jerseys. Even more recently, dare I say it, maybe the occasional Andrew Luck jersey, Jack Doyle jersey. But what I have not seen necessarily is a Daniel Jones jersey. But Daniel Jones actually is probably the perfect jersey to wear if you are a fan of the Indianapolis Colts, because he kind of represents Indianapolis in general. And that is the fact that, just kind of know who you are. And one of the things about this town that I love is we know who we are. We're proud of it, but we know who we are, right? And I think Shane Steichen looked at him, and so far it's worked. And the guy he doesn't say a lot. He's not he has a confidence about him. I think he had to earn the trust of the rest of his teammates because he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that is walking into operationally, right? I don't think he's walking into a quarterback room like, all right, fellas, let's go. I'm here. I'm the guy. I think he just comes in, does his job, gets there a little bit early, brings his playbook, knows it. And I think he earned the respect now of his teammates. And I think members of the Colts really like Anthony Richardson as well. I don't think he's a bad guy at all. As a matter of fact, there are probably some of them that with Daniel Jones, it took them a while to really trust him and understand who he was and what he's all about. It's kind of like something that happened to me in college. College is about learning life experience.
Which time in college, Jake?
Excellent question. Excellent question.
We're talking about the one where you just graduated like 2 years ago, or the first time when you went to Kansas and then came back home, went to IU?
Have you ever seen video of the Hindenburg disaster?
No.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's terrible because I think there were multiple fatalities, but have you ever seen the Led Zeppelin logo?
Yeah.
Okay. The Hindenburg disaster, very representative of my freshman year of college at the University of Kansas. But something did happen to me there that college is about life learning experiences. And I think I learned something and saw something that allows me to better understand and appreciate the 2025 Indianapolis Colts. So I'll explain what I'm talking about. Matt Taylor going to join us coming up 2:30. JT the Brick in 35 minutes, but I will get into what that life lesson was and how it applies to Daniel Jones next. So this song, that's right, Brass Monkey. You hear us reference, and by the way, Chicago's Pizza, I said 17. I don't know what I think. It's 18 Central Indiana locations. 18 of them, and every one of them is awesome. 25 statewide. And Eddie, you mentioned earlier Love Heating and Air. Love-HVAC.com, 317-353-2141. They sponsor the crossover chat with JMV and I, and you hear us talk about them a lot on this radio station. I grew up with John and Chris, and Chris Love in particular does. If anybody out there hearing my voice knows John or Chris Love, in particular Chris, they are twins. He does the greatest dance to Brass Monkey by the Beastie Boys that he invented in the 8th grade of all time. If you're ever around Chris and John Love and just say, look, and put Brass Monkey on your phone, that song, and he will do the greatest dance you've ever seen, for what that's worth. So when I was in college, I was a freshman in college at the University of Kansas. And I went out when I was a senior in high school, and this was actually probably one of the biggest mistakes of my life. But again, college is about learning, right? It's about learning life lessons. It's about so much more than the academics of it. I think the biggest thing you learn in college is just about people. But when I was a senior in high school and I went out to visit Kansas, I met a couple of guys that were part of a fraternity there, and they're like, hey, do you want to, we want you in our fraternity. And so I thought, okay, great. This is going to be great. I'm going to have friends right away. And so instead of organically going through what most kids do in college and living in the dorms, I went immediately into it right away. When my parents dropped me off for college, I was living in a fraternity house. I was a pledge in the Phi Delta Theta fraternity. And so, and my parents now have told me that when they were driving away, they were on I-70 before they'd even gotten to Kansas City, and I think both of them looked at each other and said, this is not going to go well. And I've always appreciated that even though they knew that, I had to go through that on my own. I had to learn that on my own. But when so I get there, and as a pledge class, we were there 2 weeks before classes started. So we had to do all the things that you do when you were a pledge in a fraternity. We're getting up every morning and cleaning the house and brassoing doorknobs and landscaping. I mean, it was brutal. And the whole, I have no idea. We can do a whole different talk show on what the purpose of those things are. But nonetheless, so that was before the classes began. And then once school began, they added 2 members to our pledge class. So these 2 guys show up in our pledge class, and we've now got to continue doing all the same stuff, but there's these 2 new guys that they're like, okay, these are your teammates now. What? So one day, and we hadn't had much sleep and whatever else, and I remember one day, one of these 2 guys said or did something I didn't like, whatever, and I completely snapped. And I'm like, look, I don't know who you think you are, but we've been in here toiling this whole time. We've been working hard. We've been doing all this stuff. We've had to go through all this stuff for a month before you guys just got airdropped in, and we're told now that you're part of our pledge class. Well, you're not part of the pledge class, in my opinion, because look at everything we've gone through, and you're just going to walk in now and be airdropped in and soak in the fun of being a part of this class. And we had to kind of work our way through that. I mean, whatever. I think with Daniel Jones, I can now see, I think it took a slower period because the Colts in general, and through the Anthony Richardson experience and experiment to an extent, the rest of the roster was trying so hard to, and I think they like Anthony Richardson. I mean, I think he's a likable guy, but they wanted so badly for it to work with Anthony Richardson that they went through all the rigors, all the growing pains, all the ups and downs and the yo-yo and the scrutiny and and everything that comes with having a young quarterback that you're trying to build around, you're trying to win for. And then all of a sudden this guy just comes in and Daniel Jones, and it's like, wait a minute, we've gone through all this other stuff. Who are you? You think you're just going to come in and, like, just because you signed a contract, now all of a sudden, like, you're the guy that's going that we've all got to just accept as the same members of the foundation of the rest of this pledge class? And yet, Daniel Jones, just like Blake and Richter, those are the two guys' names. I won't say first or last names, but those two guys, eventually, I realized that it was on me. I was the one being immature. And I'm not saying the Colts players are being immature. I'm saying once I really looked at their situation and realized that it wasn't their fault that they were added late or whatever else, then I was like, you know what? I get it. And so we kind of found the common ground, and they became great. I mean, they were great guys. I think in sport in general, it represents life, and the fact that when you go through something and then all of a sudden there's like, everybody has that coworker that, like, did you hear they just hired a new guy in accounting? This Mark guy. I don't know anything about him, but like, and for the first couple of weeks, people are like, oh, that's the new guy. That's the guy. They let Bill go, and then Mark's in here. And then you work with him, and you're like, you know what? This guy's a good guy. Like, and here's what he brings to the table, and he's really good at this or that. And I think that acclimation period had to happen for the Colts, to be honest with you. And I think it took place over the course of training camp. And a lot of Daniel Jones, the credit for Daniel Jones is the fact that I don't think he came in with all right, new sheriff in town, guys. He just seems to be a more understated, quiet guy, professional. And he himself had kind of gone through his own PTSD in New York with the Giants. And he was basically, the thing I think that we forget is that Daniel Jones is the New York Giants' Anthony Richardson. I mean, he's the guy in New York right now. I guarantee you on Sports Talk Radio, people are like, for 3 years, they were having the conversation about Daniel Jones that we've been having about Anthony Richardson of like, yeah, we see the glimpses, we see the flashes, but when's it all going to come together? And I think he came in here knowing that oddity of he could relate to what Richardson was going through, but he also knew that, like, it was brass tacks time and get down to it, and he's got an opportunity here, and he's got a second lease, and I think it took a while, but I think the rest of the roster, the rest of the franchise, the rest of the locker room realized that over the course of time by just watching how he goes about things. And that's what Shane Steichen talks about when he says it's about operational. It's about what takes place above and beyond. What does he say? It's beyond what takes place on the field. It's the analysis and the acclimation period of just people, of new face, new change, and then putting yourself in the situation, in the position of thinking about what their standpoint is, what their viewpoint is. And I think the rest of the roster, when they've done that with Jones, they've said, you know what, I get it now. And he's earned the respect of his teammates. And I would like to think that he has. I think most people now are on board. And Eddie, we were coming off a game where he had 2 turnovers and they lost, and we'll see again if that's the anomaly. But if it is, and he continues to play like he did the first 3 weeks over the course of time, I do think it is possible that a guy that was, I think, theoretically brought in to push Richardson may, in fact, they found their answer beyond this year. But that all comes into negotiation because he's getting ready to go into a year with a new contract. Not unlike a new contract for an entire league of players, of which the straw mixing all of that negotiation is literally like 6 blocks from where we are right now. And that athlete talked about it earlier today, and we now can play that for you, which we will do next. And JT, the brick from the Raiders standpoint in 20. NBA don't just want their MTV, they want their fair share in the WNBA. That's the reality. And as I mentioned earlier, I think what we are seeing here, and again, to put it in a Cliff Note version, the players of the WNBA have a collective bargaining agreement, the Players Association. That is the agreement that was settled upon with the ownership groups of the WNBA in terms of the amount that they get paid, the television contracts, etc. That collective bargaining agreement is set to expire in 2027. But both sides have agreed to a new negotiation because of new television revenue, sponsorship revenue, etc. And that negotiation has a deadline of the end of this month. So they are right now in the midst of negotiating a new contract between the WNBA owners and the league itself and the Players Association. The players are looking for the same thing that most people are in their place of employment. More money, better benefits, more coverage for things like, obviously, childcare, maternity leave, those sorts of things, okay? In the last week, what we have seen is one of the WNBA's biggest stars, Nafisa Collier, holding a press conference in her player exit interview and discussing and bringing to attention some of what she believes to be a league-wide frustration with notably the commissioner of the WNBA, Kathy Engelbert. And she brought Caitlin Clark's name into the equation. Here is Nafisa Collier with that statement, if you will, earlier this week.
At Unrivaled this past February, I sat across from Kathy and asked how she planned to address the officiating issues in our league. Her response was, well, only the losers complain about the refs. I also asked how she planned to fix the fact that players like Caitlin, Angel, and Paige, who are clearly driving massive revenue for the league, are making so little for their first 4 years. Her response was, Caitlin should be grateful she makes $16 million off the court, because without the platform that the WNBA gives her, she wouldn't make anything. And in that same conversation, she told me players should be on their knees thanking their lucky stars for the media rights deal that I got them.
So Caitlin Clark today talked, and again, she is an epicenter piece of all of this because of the revenue that probably is attached to her transcendently. But this is Caitlin Clark's reaction, if you will, to the statement from Nafisa Collier.
First of all, I have great respect for Fee, and I think she made a lot of very valid points. And, I think what people need to understand, we need great leadership in this time across all levels. This is straight up the most important moment in this league's history. This league's been around for 25 plus years, and this is a moment we have to capitalize on. So that's honestly what I would say. I think there's, Fee said it all with what she said, and, I think the points she made were very valid.
Okay. The other thing that was addressed there, and I get it, what we are seeing here before our very eyes is no different than what you see at times in the NFL or the NBA. The NFL and the NBA have billions of dollars of television contract. And we long ago accepted. It was a massive deal when George Foster got a multi-million-dollar contract for the New York Mets. It was a massive deal when Nolan Ryan made $1 million a year in Major League Baseball. Those contracts and those salaries now within the NFL and the NBA. I remember Eric Dickerson walking off the field as a Colt saying, they're paying me $1 million a year to carry the ball 13 times when he was frustrated with his touches. But since then, the numbers have gone astronomical. So we already long ago were almost desensitized as a fan base to the money that's thrown around amongst those leagues. It is new to us to think of the money that is involved within the Women's National Basketball Association, the WNBA. But the revenue is now starting to increase in terms of the amount that's within the pot to be divvied up. So what we are seeing before our very eyes is a public tug of war for positioning between the commissioner, whose job it is to represent the owners and get the best deal for them, and the players, whose job it is as an association to make sure they're getting the best deal as well. This is a public power play right before our very eyes. The one thing, amongst many you could say, where Kathy Engelbert erred, in my opinion, was when she talks about and brings into play the notion that the WNBA is the vehicle by which Caitlin Clark is able to make a lot of money. The reality is Caitlin Clark is the vehicle by which the WNBA is allowed to make a lot of money. And that goes no further than to look at the attention. Caitlin Clark was already a transcendent name and star within sports in this country. Not women's sports, when she was at the University of Iowa. She was a major star at Iowa. When the dots were connected that she was going to become a member of the Indiana Fever, I did with Jimmy Cook, Eddie, you were here. We sat at the NFL Combine with writers from the NFL and did an entire show that day talking about Caitlin Clark. Scott Long came on to talk about how she's the Taylor Swift of basketball. All of that from the NFL draft, because she was already that transcendent a star at Iowa. And the thought that the WNBA is what is the vehicle and the platform that allows her to make that money is ludicrous. Caitlin Clark could be playing right now in one of the other leagues, Ice Cube's league or whatever, that she got invited to play into, and she would be making the same level of endorsement money. Here's Caitlin Clark addressing that aspect of this conversation.
I think that's probably the way in which the league has probably changed over the course of the last few years. You know, these kids and what they're making in college these days is pretty insane. It's honestly probably more than what I made. Obviously, a lot has changed even since I've graduated, so I'm not 100% up to date on the exact numbers of what college kids are making. But, you know, obviously I was very fortunate after my freshman year of college. That's when I began working with, you know, different brands, and began working with Nike. And, you know, everybody knows my first NIL deal was with Hy-Vee, the greatest grocery chain of all time, based in Des Moines, Iowa, baby. So best chocolate long johns around. But, you know, I think that's the way in which, like, you know, young women are coming into this league now with that type of, you know, I don't even want to say it's money, but they're beginning to build their brands in college, and then they're bringing that to the WNBA. So I think that's just a way in which the league has changed and will continue to evolve. And, like, back to my main point, you know, like I said, we are in the biggest moment in WNBA history. There's no denying that. Everybody knows that. And everybody that's in a place in power has a true responsibility, and even myself, we have a responsibility to make sure that this game is in a great place going forward with the CBA, and, you know, caring for our players, and, you know, building this league to make sure it's in a great spot for many years to come. Because you all know I grew up as a huge fan of this league, and I'm going to do everything I can to make this the league that, you know, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, a girl in college is really proud of, to come into and to be able to put a WNBA uniform on. And, you know, that's what they dream of. And then hopefully they can accomplish that goal, because that's exactly who I was. And that's, you know, really at the end of the day, like, I hope that's what my legacy can be, is just how I impacted people to be able to maybe want to be in the WNBA, but to really just achieve whatever they want to achieve.
And again, and by the way, Long's Donuts, Hy-Vee is a pretty good grocery store, but Long's Donuts probably make the best donuts, or chocolate long johns, or whatever it was she said there. But the point taken, yes, she is correct. She was making that money at Iowa. I remember the Iowa IndyCar race when she was a Hawkeye, and I'm there at the race, and they're like, "Oh, Caitlin Clark is here." Oh, okay. Yeah, she's here on behalf of Hy-Vee. And at that time, I'm thinking, really? But that was right when NIL began, and she was already the face of Hy-Vee. And then you get into Nike and Gatorade and the rest of them. And that was when she was a college basketball player. And I get the fact that the WNBA has to present themselves as, please be aware of or understand what we are doing for you, the athlete. But at this point, the athlete is correct in saying, no. Now it's about what we are doing for you, the league.
And mainly what she has done for the league. Like,
Correct.
Look at the past year, 2 years, where you've got Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever playing in NBA arenas.
Correct. And yes.
They're not moving.
The television numbers alone, the television ratings alone are, she is, in fact, and you know what? A big thing happened this year in the fact that look at how far her team went when she was out, and I mean that as a credit to people still paid attention.
Yes.
Because the people were now introduced to the rest of that roster because of Caitlin Clark. And so people realize, oh, wow, Kelsey Mitchell's really exciting to watch. And by the way, the best to her on the recovery of what turned out to be beyond just cramping, but, a complex issue. I think Ralph Reif will join us early next week, and we'll get more into what that could mean long-term for Kelsey Mitchell in terms of the injury, and credit to that phenomenal training staff for recognizing early what could have been worse. But, Kelsey Mitchell and Odyssey Sims and Leah Boston and the rest of the players in the league, people looked at it now and they're like, oh, wow, I might go into Hy-Vee for the Long John's chocolate donuts, but then I realized there's a whole bunch of other stuff in this grocery store I really like, and that's what's happened. JT Brick works radio for the Raiders, joins us to talk about Raiders Colts next. Indianapolis. For that matter, it's 2 o'clock everywhere in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison, the other voice you hear on this program. We call it Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Colts and Raiders at Lucas Oil Stadium coming up on Sunday. Our next guest needs no introduction, but I will provide one nonetheless. He is with Raider Nation Radio, 920 a.m. in Las Vegas, but he is also synonymous with Sports Talk Radio. He does a daily show from noon until 2 Vegas time. JT the Brick joins us to talk about the upcoming matchup. JT, how are you? Do we have JT, Eddie? We had him, and then
yeah, guys, I'm right here. I'm right here, guys.
There we go. All right, what's going on, man?
All right, guys, thanks for having me. Buckle up, your audience. This is nothing less than a must-win for the Raider Nation. We have our back against the wall on steroids. We have to win this game. We have to win this. I'm not into this must-win, blah, 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 must-win. If Raiders lose 1-4 with guys like Max Crosby, Brock Bowers, Ashton Genty, Pete Carroll, our new minority owner, Tom Brady, this was not expected. And we're going up against Daniel Jones. We got Geno Smith, who's always been better than Daniel Jones until this year, mysteriously. Raiders have got to get out of Lucas Oil with a win.
Okay, so let's begin with Geno Smith because, JT, I'm going to be honest with you, and you and I talked yesterday, and I think Daniel Jones, to some extent, there's a little bit of people here would like to see a Geno Smith thing. And what I mean by that was change of scenery. Suddenly you realize a guy was better than perhaps what his first opportunity showed for him. But Geno Smith is now turning the football over again. What is it about, whether it be schematically or just Smith himself, that has caused him now to be prone to throwing the ball away?
Great question. He's been, Raiders opened up in New England, and he was really good. So his first game with the Raiders got off great in a rain game outdoors, because Geno's a different quarterback indoors than outdoors, believe it or not. And he played in Seattle where he's made his bones. So he's supposed to be good indoors. But this Tampa 2 high safety scheme that teams have been running at him, where a safety comes down in the box and tricks him, he's been throwing into tight windows. And you know this, if you're throwing to a guy who's open, you're not going to throw interceptions because guys are open unless it's a deflection or a tip ball. Geno's trying to hit these guys in tight windows. And when he's doing it, he's just off. He's just off by, half a second. And these safeties have been making pretty good plays on him. So no excuses here. The thing that, Jake, which is troublesome to me, is he's such a good player when he's in a calm environment and he's got a little bit of protection. The bad news for the Raiders going into this game is that Colt Miller's down, and he's one of our best players since Oakland. He's a left tackle who should have been a Pro Bowler. He's just one of the top 5 left tackles in football. He just went down. He went on IR, and now it's going to be really tough to fill his needs. But the Raiders are coming off a game against the Bears where Pete Carroll, who I interview exclusively every week, told me one of the first times he looked at the tape and said, man, we played well. We lost by 1 point on a block kick. It happens. Indy had the same issue on the leverage play against Denver. But Pete's pretty excited that he's starting to see the team he wants to see, but they got to get a win because now it's getting to the point where Raider Nation, with all due respect to the Colts fans, Raider Nation can get a little bit more angry than the nice people of the Midwest and Indy, and that's what I'm fighting off right now.
It's fun. Actually, it's funny, JT, because when the Raiders – when they moved there, I remember thinking to myself, I still think of the Raiders, obviously, of Black Hole Oakland Raider Nation, and I know they were in L.A. too, but I'm like, if there was one place for them to move that just seems perfect, it's Vegas, right? I mean, just Vegas. Everything about Vegas and the Raiders just seems to fit, right? But in terms of this roster, let's talk about Ashton Genty because now he's starting to fit. I think he's starting to show what we expected to see out of him when they took him. But are they just now starting to more incorporate him because he's gotten his footing, or is it because of necessity, because they're having to kind of take things away a little bit from Geno Smith's danger situations of dangerous passing situation?
No, they tried him every which way. It's really simple to compare it to Jonathan Taylor, who's a great player. And you've been through this with Jonathan Taylor over his career. So if the holes are open, he's gone. If the holes aren't open, he's not. And with Ashton Genty, it's been hit or miss. The games where he's had holes to hit, he's hit them beautifully. Like Ryan Clark took such a deep, dirty hit at Ashton Genty a couple of weeks ago on ESPN where he said he didn't have the it factor. And I don't mind Ryan Clark overall, but it was such a dirty, cheap hit on a kid who couldn't get back to the line of scrimmage because the offensive line couldn't get him a hole, so he was getting blown up. Well, look at the tape of last game. He hits the hole and he's gone, and he's making plays in the passing game. So it's a good example in this game here. I don't know how great the Colts front is, but the Raiders' offensive line played really well last week, and it's about time. They've been awful. If they can get him to the second level on some linebackers, Genty will make guys miss, and he'll also truck a safety, and he'll run over a corner. But, I mean, you got to be licking your chops in Indy because if you look at the tape, half of the plays or 3/4 of Genty's attempts has been a defensive tackle hitting him 2 yards deep and blowing him up. And if that happens again, it puts Geno in 3rd and 9, 3rd and 11, 3rd and 12. And the real bummer about this going into this game is Brock Bowers because he's going to play. But I wish you guys could see Brock Bowers for the first time at 100% because it is fascinating to see this guy play. What a gift from God that the Raiders got Brock Bowers in the draft a couple of years ago, but he'll have a knee brace on, and he hasn't been able to click just yet.
You know, it's interesting because JT the Brick, by the way, out in Vegas, is our guest. I think to an extent what Colts fans would like to think, JT, is that they have seen a version of Brock Bowers, and they've seen it in the form of Tyler Warren, because I think that's obviously what Indianapolis, the blueprint was kind of there in terms of Brock Bowers. I wanted you to speak to our audience about, you know, Tyler Warren and the ability to have that kind of a tight end and what it does to your offense to kind of soften a defense. You've seen it with Bowers when he is at 100%. How much of a game changer is that to the versatility of your offense?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a great question because Bowers is a new version of that. I'll take it out even further to George Kittle because when the Niners had good receivers at 100%, when Brandon Ayuk was playing at a very high level, and they just had receivers who were really good and then a great tight end, it changes everything. The Raiders have Jacoby Myers, who's a very good number 2. Trey Tucker had a 3-touchdown game early. He's a pretty good player, but not super elite. Now with Pittman and Warren, if you had another receiver like a T. Higgins per se, or just another star, it just opens up everything because you have to decide on doubling the tight end. Like Travis Kelce, in his prime, you had to double him, and that opens it up for a receiver. So for Brock, they're not doubling him here so far this year because he's just not 100%. When he is, and they double him, then it opens up lanes for the running game, and it gets another receiver in single coverage. So I think the Colts got to be really happy that they have an elite young tight end that can open up the game, and especially in the red zone. Because I lose my mind. I do the pre and post, a lot of other things for the Raiders, and the only thing that bothers me in game is when they get away from Bowers. Like last week, we had a 1st and goal on the 7 against the Bears to go up 2 scores, to go up 9. The game would have been over. On 1st and goal from the 7, they ran Genty into the pile for a 1-yard loss. On 2nd and 8, they ran Genty into the pile for a 3-yard loss. Then it was 3rd and goal from like the 13 or 14, and they didn't even look at Bowers, who was wide open. Look at the tape in the corner of the end zone. They checked down underneath to Dante Thornton. He dropped the ball. It was a catchable ball. The Raiders kick a field goal, end up losing to the Bears when they had the kill shot right there to put the game away, and they didn't give it to Bowers. And I'm going to say the same thing about Warren with you down the road. When you have an opportunity to get the ball to Warren at the 5-yard line, you better do it because he's an elite player who can make a play.
You know, actually what happened at the end of that game, JT, I think you jinxed it because you sent a tweet that said, the Raiders have a chance here to score and put this away.
Yeah, well, don't follow me on Twitter during the game. I'm sure my bosses are looking at me in the box going, oh, here he goes. He's 2 boxes down. Here he goes. But, you know, guys, for this game, a quick thing. Daniel Jones, I grew up born and raised a Giant fan. in my former life. It's year 28 with the Raiders, so my allegiance with the Raiders. But my dad is 87 years old, and he's a diehard Giant fan. And he'd always tell me, Daniel Jones is so good. He's such a great athlete. He can run. But he was a turnover machine. And even though he didn't have great teams with the Giants, he would personally shoot the team in the foot by throwing it to the other team. It's nice to see he's not doing that anymore under Shane Steichen, that they're giving him the opportunity to be good because he's a really good runner. And I said this, when he takes off and there's no one in front of him, it's beautiful to watch because a lot of people don't give him credit for that. He's really good in open space.
So when in terms of that space, JT, before we let you go, defensively the Raiders are susceptible where? If you're Shane Steichen, you're trying to take advantage of what defensive weakness for the Raiders?
Corner, because the Raiders, Pete Carroll, it's really unique what he wants to do. Pete Carroll comes from the Legion of Boom, correct? Legion of Boom. Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, and he built the Legion of Boom. And he wants that specific type of player, 6'2" corner, thumping, hitting safety. He's got the safeties. Jeremy Chin played for the Commanders last year in the NFC Championship, good player. And Isaiah Palomal, who's another good young safety. Problem is a corner. They don't have corners. They have Eric Stokes, who came from the Packers, decent, and then Caillou Blue Kelly or Darian Porter, who are young. So every game we've played so far this year, 4 of them, we're 1-3. There's a gift touchdown to the other team. There's just one play, broken play, 30-yard, 60-yard touchdown where you scratch your head and go, oh, you know, a young kid just gave up a touchdown. That can't happen in this game. They got to clean that up. So I think that the Raiders know that you're going to try to run the ball. And if the Raiders can't stop the run, the game's over. If the Raiders can take Taylor out of the game for a little bit, because the Raiders are pretty good so far statistically at stopping the run other than the Commanders game, which was just a throwaway stat game, then they'll put the pressure on Daniel Jones. We won in Raider Nation for Daniel Jones to beat us. We don't believe that Daniel Jones, I'm not talking for the team, I'm talking for the fans. We don't believe that Daniel Jones, who's been a turnover machine his whole life, can throw for 350 and 4 touchdowns. If he does, you know where to find me. We got to hope that Daniel Jones gives us the ball 1 or 2 times in this game so we can eke a game out and get on the plane and come home 2-3 going into Tennessee, which gives us 3-3, and now the Raider Nation is stabilized.
Your dad believes, JT.
He does.
Hey,
he does.
Before we let you go, I wanted to ask you this, and I can't remember if we had you on to ask you this before, but being in Vegas, I'm assuming that you see some UNLV football. Purdue, obviously, and I like so far what I've seen. I know the win-loss doesn't show it just yet, but I like what I've seen out of Barry Odom because he looks like a guy that is going to have a team that doesn't do what you're talking about of shooting themselves in the foot. How much impression did you get from him during the time he was at UNLV?
He was outstanding. A matter of fact, we were pretty bitter because it's a really different topic that we should do on a podcast. How does UNLV not draw from this multi-billion-dollar entertainment capital of the world, all this NIL money? It's Vegas, right? We got everything in Vegas. And he left to go to Purdue. And we're like, wait a second, we love Purdue. It's in a bigger conference. We get it. But he had this team almost in the playoffs last year at UNLV. Dan Mullen took over his team. Dan Mullen's a TV guy and a good Dax coach and coached at Florida. Now the UNLV Rebels are 4-0. And Odom had a lot to do with it. Those are his players, most of them. He is a gritty, no-nonsense guy. Only if Purdue can spend some money for him. I mean, look, Purdue's got to put their big boy pants on and say that if we're going to stay here and compete against Michigan and Wisconsin and Ohio State, we got to raise some money. And if you do and you get him better players, he'll coach him up. He's a very good, hard-nosed coach, gets the most out of a roster.
JT, appreciate the time as always, man. It's always good to catch up with you. We'll see what happens. Sounds like defensively this is going to be like the Spider-Man on Spider-Man meme because the Colts' susceptibility is also in the attrition that's hit their defensive backfield. So the corners is a question mark for certain. So one of those two is probably licking their chops, whether it be Geno Smith or Daniel Jones. But certainly appreciate it. Safe travels to you, all right?
Yeah, I'll leave you on this note, guys. Max Crosby's worth the price of admission. He's having a Defensive Player of the Year award season. He's that good. If you got a ticket to the game, watch Max Crosby 98. I think you'll be blown away by an individual effort. We'll see who wins the game. Thanks for having me, guys.
Appreciate it. JT the Brick joining us from Las Vegas. Good stuff there. Good stuff on Barry Odom as well. And I agree with that about, the NIL aspect from Purdue is, that's a whole different talk show, right? Just in terms of every school. I mean, you think about it, when you look at schools, and I get it. I mean, that's a whole, as he mentioned, that's a whole podcast in itself, right? Because of just the way it works now of college athletics and one-year rentals, essentially, of players. I mean, you have no idea how long you're actually going to have players and whether they're going to transfer and go to greener pastures. I don't know. And Eddie, think about like the smaller, UNLV for that matter. I mean, he's right. UNLV's got to have NIL money out there with all the money out there, right? But think about the Wyomings of the world, the San Jose State, the
Go Pokes,
Appalachian State. Pokes they got UNLV coming up this weekend, by the way. Those schools, how do you compete with it? I mean, the Horizon League, for example, and I love the Horizon League. And yesterday during, sitting there for media day for the Horizon League in basketball and really good players. And I think IU Indy is going to be, and we can get more into this in a little bit, but I think they're going to be fun to watch this year.
They're going to be interesting, Jake. Allegedly they want to do like hockey subs, like 5 in,
Yes.
5 out.
Well, so IU Indy is going to be in basketball this year. I think they have the potential. And I'm not saying that this level of win, right? But they have potential to be kind of like the Indiana State story of what it was 2 years ago. Because they have – so here you have a coach in Ben Hallett that comes over from West Liberty. And you go, West Liberty? Well, he was like 217 and 37 or something like that during the time that he was there. And he runs the Grinnell / Old Loyola Marymount offense of go, 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 go. And 5 guys on the floor at all time with just constant rotation, to your point, almost like hockey rotation. And, you look at it and you think about players that you have on that roster and you're like, this is awesome, and people are going to want to come and play for it, and you can just go, and you got to trust your teammates and whatever else. But if you have guys like what happened with Indiana State where they have a big year and then, you lose your coach in that situation, I realize, but schools that then bigger schools that come along and say, you know what, we're going to give you $50,000, $100,000, whatever it may be. How do the smaller schools like that compete? And in Purdue's case, as he's talking about, I mean, yes, Purdue's going to have NIL money, but they're not going to have Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State level backer money because of just the branding that goes in and the merchandising with those programs and what those schools can do and et cetera. I mean, it's the wild, wild west for certain. No question about it. And then and in some ways, it's a balancing act because you can get players on a one-year rental or whatever else, but you have like a year to cash it in, and then the next year you're doing it all over again. And basketball certainly more so even than in football, because in basketball, one guy can change your whole thing, right? I mean, no question about it. But, it's an interesting point he makes just in terms of Barry Odom in Vegas and now, what's going on with Purdue in general. Indiana off this weekend. They've got Oregon coming up, Autzen Stadium. That is going to be next weekend. And that gives you – and I think is Oregon off this weekend as well? I think they are.
Yes, they are.
And, for Indiana, and how many times have we said this in the last season? But, again, is this
top
the
10 matchup?
Biggest game in program history? Well, we had like 3 of those last year, right? I mean, it's seemingly every year, every week now for Indiana. But that's what happens when you get into the top 10. And like I said the other day, if Indiana were to win, that's good news for them then later in the year if they're able to hold serve and go into Penn State ranked in the top 10, automatic win, because Penn State can't beat anybody in the top 10 at home, right? Were they 4-21 under James Franklin against the top 10?
Yeah, they're horrible.
That's rough, right?
Very.
But back to the Raiders and Colts game and Geno Smith and Pete Carroll. And I do like Geno Smith, but he's right in the fact that, you forget that when Geno Smith really got his consistency, it was in Seattle where he was playing with Pete Carroll. I mean, it's not like this is a new marriage. They are certainly familiar with one another, what they can do, what needs to be done. And the Raiders are – I watched that Bears game, and, I mean, they had that game won on like 5 different occasions. But what separates not good teams from good or great teams is good to great teams win the games they're supposed to win and win the games that they control. And they controlled that game until literally the last, 3 minutes. To his point, they had the game won. And that was listen, Indiana was a bad beat, to use that term. And if you're a gambler, I'm not. But if you are,
oh man,
Indiana and Iowa was a bad beat.
It was brutal
because of the safety at the end of the game just to run the clock out, which swung the point differential.
Yeah, the punter could have stopped on the 18-yard line.
Quarterback.
I thought it was the punter.
No, it was Mendoza.
Okay.
Right? I'm certain it was, wasn't it? He took the snap and just ran it into the end zone and then took the knee in the end zone to run the clock out. I'm almost certain it was. Maybe I'm wrong. But either way, and then you have that game with the Raiders. I mean, they're lining up for a field goal. Yeah, it was like a 54-yarder, but, and the Bears block it, game over. But they had that game won, man. Brutal. This week in the NFL is interesting because if you do, as I do, like with my buddies, we do a pool where we do.
The confidence pool is what you do,
confidence
right?
Pool, yeah. And there are some weeks you look at it and you're like, man, this is an impossible week. This week looks like, knock on wood, but it looks like an easier week. There are a lot of games that just seem to be like foregone conclusion. When you look at it, you're like, it's just not great matchups. But listen, that's why they play the games, right? I mean, that much we know. It's the beauty of the NFL. But the Colts defensively getting into the backfield, as he was talking about, and trying to stop the run before it develops. I mean, that's an area that seemingly is a strength for the Colts. Do the Raiders scare you, Eddie? Do the Raiders, when you think of the Raiders, do you think of this as a matchup that is overly daunting, or is it confusing is the wrong word. Is it enigmatic? Because like I said, the Raiders, I think, to his point, we thought were going to be better at this point than they are, right? Or at least from a win-loss.
I think it's another one of those games where you just have to take care of business. Like, the Colts are better than the Raiders.
Good teams. It's a game that good teams win, right?
Yes. And if the Colts are if Daniel Jones just goes out there and do what he did weeks 1 through 3, takes care of the football, just like a point guard, distributes it to wherever the ball needs to go to the open guy. They're able to run the ball effectively with Jonathan Taylor. Eventually, he'll break a big one like he has in every game this year. And the defense holds serves. They're able to get to Geno Smith. And the creativity of Lou Anarumo and the coverage, scheme and disguise is able to confuse Smith and force a couple turnovers. Then boom! I mean,
the turnovers
that's all
are
it's
going to
come
be key,
down
right?
to. Yes,
it's going to be key. All right. Well, the Colts obviously yesterday had a retirement. They got another big retirement coming up on Sunday. We'll tell you about both of those. And Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts, joins us next. So let's get right to it with Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts. Colts and Raiders coming up on Sunday at Lucas Oil Stadium. And, Matt, I'll begin with, as I think we probably do each week with you, and that is simply a medical update, if you will. Those that we think are now going to be in and those that we are still waiting to find out whether or not you're going to be saying their name on Sunday.
Yeah, for the Colts, I mean, I think right now Kenny Moore's probably, I don't know, I don't want to speculate, but I wouldn't be shocked if he didn't play. I'll just put it at that, missing another game, kind of a hybrid injury between his calf and Achilles. Alec Pierce is trending in the right direction, right? Still has to clear those 5 stages of the concussion protocol. He is back to practice this week, so that's good news, and we'll see where his status is later in the week and, tomorrow. And then I don't know if perhaps, the independent neurologist, as they like to say, would get involved either late tomorrow or Saturday, depending on how things go. And then outside of that, not really injury related, but just in terms of personnel, what's going to happen at cornerback now without Xavien Howard and his availability and him retiring. And so a lot of shuffling perhaps going on in the back end in that secondary.
By the way, I don't know about you, Matt, but with me, oftentimes when something's dinged up and I go to the doctor, they tell me my injury's hybrid. Because I've got so many muscles, they can't tell the difference, right? Isn't that the sign of an elite athlete when your injury's a hybrid athlete? Or a hybrid injury, I mean?
The problems that you have to deal with, Jake, that the normal people don't, it's just amazing.
That's right.
I don't know how you deal with it, man.
That's right. Okay, so let's speak of how you deal with that, exactly what you just mentioned in, now having Xavien Howard out of the mix. And so therefore, and again, with no Kenny Moore at the nickel spot, and you got to kind of reshuffle things around, that means that's, I'm going to say slack for lack of a better phrase, but we see shuffling around where? I mean, who is going to see more reps now in the defensive backfield for Indianapolis?
Yeah, I wish I had the answer. I don't know yet. It's a big question mark because, Kenny's obviously in a little bit of jeopardy of playing. So Mike Hilton is, I want to use the phrase getting up to speed, but that's probably a little bit unfair to him just because of his familiarity with this defense under Lou Anarumo. But as it relates to just, playing with the Colts and, getting familiar with the guys around him, he's still very, very fresh, having been signed, last Tuesday. So I think next man up on the outside, your options there are Jonathan Edwards. He's got some local flavor to him because he played a couple years at Indiana State before he transferred to Tulane. And I thought he had a really good training camp and preseason. I thought if you would have asked me the odds of him making the team coming out of training camp, I would have said probably none, just considering the depth the Colts had at that position. But as we know, that depth's been tested because of injuries, and he's, put one foot in front of the other and walking through that door of opportunity. Then you got Mekhi Blackman. He can play on the outside and play nickel, but I think the Colts probably prefer to play him more on the outside at this point. And then on your practice squad, you've got Chris Lamond and some other guys. I mean, obviously Lamond has got the most experience just in terms of not only playing experience, but just familiarity with, the guys that he would be, potentially around on defense in the back end. So, yeah, I think that is the biggest question mark surrounding this team going into Week 5 is, who plays in the secondary, who do they trust, and what roles are these guys put into?
It's funny, Matt, Blackman, who was a guy that was a late acquisition via trade just before the roster was set. And at the time, you just thought it was an insurance policy. But it goes back to, Matt, you just can't have enough corners, can you? I mean, it just seems to be more and more in the NFL in 2025, it is a position of massive attrition.
Well, I mean, think about what they've done in the last 6-7 weeks, since training camp. I mean, Jalen Jones goes down, Juju Brents goes down. I mean, Brents isn't even here anymore. Jalen Jones is still on IR with one more week with that designation, able to come back next week. So we'll see. They bring in Blackman, they bring in Lamont, they bring in Xavien Howard just out of necessity because they've just been hit so hard at that position. So, yeah, I think to your point, I think corner is probably a spot that routinely gets dinged up just because of, it's a very physical position. You got to cover guys, but you also have to, play strong in the box at times, and you got to tackle on the outside. A lot of times, depending on formations and scheme, you have to come in and set the edge. So you just take a lot of wear and tear. But bigger picture than that, Jake, it just seems like for whatever reason, I think a lot of teams can attest to this and they've experienced it, but it just seems like if you're on a football team going into a season, there's just that one position, right? It's just the one position that just gets hammered. And, unfortunately for guys like Chris Ballard and Ed Dodd and some of the personnel folks within the Colts, the problem is you just don't know going into the training camp what position that's going to be. But inevitably, it always seems like just one position just gets hammered more than any others. A couple years ago it was wide receiver, and now this year it's certainly cornerback.
Matt, you were able to call Matt Taylor, our guest, as the Colts and Raiders get set on Sunday at Lucas Oil Stadium. You were able to call the touchdown for Tyler Warren, obviously, but when by him lining up in the backfield. And, we knew that was going to be something I think that was going to be in the cards. Do you anticipate that we're going to start seeing that with more regularity and not just even in short yardage situations? Regularity is maybe the wrong word. Let me rephrase that. But not that it's not going to be the anomaly play, if you will.
No, I don't think so. I think it's going to become the regularity, to your point, in short yardage. Definitely. I definitely think you're going to see that on third and short or goal line or got to have play in the red zone. Think about it. He lined up in 3 different positions in 3 plays in a row, right? He had I think it was first down, he lined up at tight end, second down, then lined him up at quarterback in the Wildcat, and then third down, they gave it to him on the belly, lining up at fullback in the backfield. So if my math is correct on all of this, so far this year he's lined up out wide as a receiver. He's lined up as a slot receiver. He's obviously lined up as an inline blocker as a tight end. He's lined up at fullback. He's lined up at tailback, and he's lined up at quarterback.
It's unbelievable, right?
It is.
But, that was – that's how Penn State used him, right? This isn't – we knew it going in, but to see it at the NFL level is really something for a rookie.
Yeah, it really is, and I think it's going to be fun for this game on Sunday. You're going to have both he and Brock Bowers on the field at the same time, and I kind of joked internally. I said, "Well, Brock Bowers is, he was last year's version of Tyler Warren, and Tyler Warren is this year's version of Brock Bowers."
Right.
It's fun to see the versatility and just kind of like that old school mentality of football where guys are asked to block and run and catch, and they're doing it all, and they're making it look like they're playing CYO football out there because they're going both ways seemingly and catching the ball and just showing off their skill set. So it's really, really fun to watch. But, yeah, I do think that you're going to see even more creative ways to get Tyler Warren the football. I just go back to that Denver game, and I think we may have talked about this last week. It's incredible to me that the same guy who lined up as fullback and crammed it in on a 2-yard short yardage first down conversion in that game, and then he did that on Sunday against the Rams as well near the goal line for a touchdown. But the same guy who's doing that is also lining up in the same formation in the backfield next to Daniel Jones and is going out for a pass and running a deep over and catching a ball downfield for 40 yards. That doesn't, to your point, it should not happen at the NFL level, but it is, and that's how special this guy is. And, crazy to think that already he leads the NFL in receiving yards among all tight ends, and this is the one that just gets me. He has the most receiving yards by any Colts player ever, regardless of position, through their first 4 games in franchise history. So, already 70 receiving yards in 3 out of his first 4 games, and just the sky's the limit. I know that's cliche, but I think it's true for Tyler Warren.
How soon until we get the Derrick Henry jump pass from Tyler Warren? Because, former quarterback, it's going to be in the playbook somewhere for him to throw a pass in a trick play.
That is the next step, Eddie. You're exactly right. That is the next evolution of all of this. Is we've seen him run, we've seen him catch. We haven't seen him throw just yet. Former high school quarterback. So maybe like a double pass, you line them up out wide, you put some blockers in front of them to give them some time to throw it behind the line of scrimmage, or we do the Tim Tebow jump pass at the line of scrimmage, near the goal line. Wouldn't be shocked at all to see any of those things.
What that's all listed as is hybrid, right?
That's it, just like you.
That's right.
I mean, you're a turn 3 announcer, you're a talk show host, and you're also
that's it.
You're like Cordell Stewart on the football field.
That's right.
You're like Flash.
We've exhausted the areas in which I hybrid, but I do hybrid, right? Hey, what defensively speaking, when we talked about the corners, the reality is this, and that is that they're going to be going up against an offense in the Raiders where we just talked to JT the Brick about this. Geno Smith has been turning the ball over, and maybe that means they become a little bit more reliant on the run game. And I think Genty's starting to show why he was selected where he was. But in terms of the Colts and their run defense, Matt, how would you critique it to this point, and are they going to be able to get penetration to make that hit behind the line?
Yeah, so far I would classify it as pretty good. It also may be a little bit incomplete, and the reason why I say incomplete is because if you look at the split so far this year, the Colts have been offensively getting off to such a good start and getting big leads in the first quarter and maybe going up by 2 scores by the middle of the second quarter that it's putting a lot of stress on the opposing offense to get back into the game, and they're having to throw the ball. So, the numbers allowed by the Colts defense is pretty good, but if you look at the minutia, like the yards per carry, that's not where they want it to be, if that makes sense. So, they're not seeing the volume of runs like they did last year when they couldn't get off the field on third down and the offense wasn't doing a very good job of gaining the lead in the first place. So that's why I say it's a little bit incomplete. But, Kyron Williams ran really hard the other day, and for the most part, they did a good job on him. He still had some leakage and some runs where he busted out for some big gains. But, for the most part, they did a good job on him and Blake Corum. But you're right on Genty, man. He looks like a beast, and he's a lottery pick, top 10 guy. And admittedly, I didn't watch a whole lot of Boise State last year, so I'm kind of playing catch up on him through the draft process and just watching him on tape. I mean, this guy runs so hard and it embraces contact. There was some viral stat going around prior to their game last week I saw where, he obviously busted out for $140 against the Bears. But prior to that, in his first 3 games of the season, I read where 100%, all of it, right? 100% of his rushing total on the season in the first 3 games came on yak, yards after contact. And that's just because he's a physical runner, A, but B, the offensive line wasn't doing a very good job of opening up holes so he can get down the field before he's, embracing tacklers and linebackers and things like that in the second level. So they're down their starting left tackle, Colton Miller. That is huge for them. Talking to some of their people that cover their team, they talk about, Geno Smith is, obviously instrumental in the passing game. Genty's instrumental in the running game, but maybe their most important player, guy that they could most ill afford to lose was Miller. And so he's on IR. That's a big break for the Colts. So hopefully they can generate a pass rush and get after Geno Smith.
Now, Matt, I'm not saying I've gotten old or soft, but I'm going to be honest with you. The only thing I get after contact is leakage and I yak, right? I mean, that's the difference.
Put it all together.
That's the difference between – that's my hybrid right there, right?
All of the buzzwords, you just collect them.
That's right.
And it's like a hodgepodge.
Okay, let's be real here in conclusion. And I know I probably say this to you every week because it's one of these weird things I have when it comes to the National Football League. But let's be real, especially – and I don't know what the color scheme, which one they go with this weekend – but the helmet design, and if they're wearing the black jerseys for the Raiders, probably as strong as any in the league, right?
I could not agree more. And I'm also partial to it because my head football coach at Franklin College, where I played, he modeled our entire program, uniforms, playbooks, logo, you name it, after the Raiders. I mean,
really?
all of our. But
isn't Franklin blue and gold?
We are, but I mean, if you looked at our jerseys, they were plain and simple, like the Raiders, big block letters. We had a shield in the style of the Raiders. I mean, it didn't say Raiders on the shield,
right,
but we had a shield that looked just like the Raiders logo. Our offense, I think, was called Raider Force. I don't know what the obsession was with the Raiders, but it's just, to your point, it's a classic look and one of the best brands in terms of professional football. I mean, it's unmistakable.
You know, actually, Franklin College, when I think of them, I think just win, baby, right? I mean, that's it.
Just win.
That's it.
The red fought, run and shoot Raider Force.
There you go. All right, Matt Taylor will be on the call on Sunday, and we will be listening to it. Matt, appreciate the time as always.
My pleasure, guys. Have a good one.
Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts, joining us on the program. We come back. We'll find out what John's got lined up. It's the crossover brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air, over 100 years in Central Indiana. Love-HVAC.com, 317-353-2141. Hey, and a glorious day. Eddie is playing right now one of those songs that I've always said is just to like roll down the windows, top down, and that's exactly what the weather, at least when we were on our way in, looked like. I assume still the same, and JMV is out able to enjoy all of it. He's got a cast of thousands along with him, friends of the show, friends of the station, and at one of our favorite places up in Fishers. John, you are lined up for what's going to be a spectacular Thursday.
Parks Place Pub, Larceny Bourbon Locks, Luna Azul Tequila Shots. We got Joel A. Erickson here, and I'm playing the role. Have you ever seen the film Bad Influence with Rob Lowe and James Spader?
Yep.
I'm the Rob Lowe. So we're going to be a bad influence for Joel A. Erickson. He's been skeptical in the past for being a part of a live show, and we thought we would just go ahead and clinch his skepticism with a little bit of fun with Joel this afternoon. So he is here.
All right, fair enough. See, usually the beer ferry arrives to bring him stuff from Wisconsin, but you and Brent's got better than that, right?
We do. We've got the Larceny Bourbon, the Luna Azul Tequila with our Larceny Bourbon Locks and Luna Azul Tequila Shots, and also Jake with the crossover. We've got a very recognizable voice. Speak to Jake.
What's up, Jake? How you doing, man?
Jimmy, hey, what's up?
Hey, it's almost that time of year, isn't it, Jake?
Hey, listen, you're fired up for the Pacers, aren't you, Jimmy?
I am, and I wanted to say I might be the only one in Cambridge on November 3rd actually cheering for Miles Turner for a minute when they play a tribute video. So.
You know what?
He probably will be the only one. Yeah,
he probably will.
Because they're gonna do that video, Jake, and his ass is gonna get booed.
Yeah, and he's trying to walk it back a little bit, but he's doing it about as well as Xavien Howard did the last couple of games going backwards, right? I mean,
I think he's getting that sound advice from the reps of Victor Oladipo. I think at this point right now, isn't he?
No, you're right about that, no question. All right, so what do you guys got lined up over the next couple hours?
Really quick, another recognizable voice, Jake, right here. Voice.
Hello, Jake. This is Derek White. How you doing?
Derek, Derek, I got to know this, man. Do you, in October when they're not playing, which doesn't happen often, do you put the Braves hat up for the fall, or do you still rock it?
I still rock it. It's been a long time since they have not made the playoffs, so I'm waiting for basketball.
You know what, though, Derek?
We do now have a new Braves coach coming in. I don't know who it's going to be.
Listen, you need to get yourself a Rebels hat, though, because Ole Miss had a pretty big win over last weekend in football, so you're good in that regard,
Toddy,
right?
number 4 Rebels. I'm
there
ready.
You go. There you go. Are they up to 4? Man, Lane Kiffin's got them dialed in.
They're too high, and it makes me very nervous that they're going to flop this weekend.
Well, who do they have this weekend? Who does Ole Miss have this weekend?
You know what? I think it's Tulane, so we shouldn't have too much trouble with them.
You're fine in that regard, no question. All right, Derek, you're in charge of babysitting the guys today, okay? Is that cool?
That means I can't drink? The free samples that will be flowing with Brent Robertson here in Heaven Hill?
You can, of course, enjoy. We'll put Jimmy's in charge. Jimmy's in charge of babysitting. All right, John, we'll throw it out to you in a couple minutes. You guys have fun. It'll be a ton of fun. Parks Place up in Fishers. Awesome location. John will be with you there for the remainder of the day. We'll be back with you at noon tomorrow. I think Stephanie White's going to join us tomorrow, and we will, of course, continue previewing Colts and Raiders. I thank you for listening to Query & Company.